It was starting to get dark by the time there was a soft knock on the door. Far softer than when the hobgoblin usually came around to announce the start of a new day or that dinner was ready. Kina did not answer, choosing to remain leaning on the banister of the balcony outside. There was a long pause before the door opened, and while Kina didn't find herself in the mood for company, it was still Zyza's house, so she chose to not show her indignation. The hobgoblin wordlessly stood next to her, leaning in much the same way and looking out over the city. She shifted after a moment, and the Kenku saw that her right hand was bandaged as Zyza moved to prop herself up on her elbows instead. Kina released a quiet rasp of a chirp and pointed at Zyza's bandaged hand, but didn't reach for her book. Zyza smirked, but didn't look in her direction as she flexed her fingers. "Well, I wasn't going to leave the device on your neck." As nonchalant as she was, the tone was still hushed and heavy. She continued looking out over the city for a long while before clearing her throat awkwardly. "This is why I was afraid to test today. It would not be the first time someone got hurt exploring something new with me." Kina looked down, frowning. After a moment, she withdrew her book and wrote,
"We're not giving up, are we?"
Zyza chuckled and shook her head. "No. I was afraid you would want to." Kina huffed and wrote,
"No. I don't care what I have to do at this point. I'm getting a voice, damn it. I didn't spend all this time working with you just to call it quits. If I did, all of this would have been for nothing."
Zyza nodded again, a faint smile fading as quickly as it appeared. "There's nothing more I can do for you at this time. I don't have better materials to make this work." Kina clacked her beak.
"There has to be something. Is there any way we can get the materials you need?"
"There is," Zyza nodded. "But this is where our problems overlap. I'm not exactly well liked here either. It's difficult to get people to sell powerful components to the resident Hopping Goblin Crazy Lady." At that, at least, Kina had to giggle slightly. It disturbed her how her natural voice, what little of it she could use, had become so raspy. She didn't know if it would stay like that. She dearly hoped it wouldn't. The amusement from the reminder of her earliest mistake with Zyza fell away quickly, however, as she really considered what Zyza was saying. She wrote,
"So we'd have to go back outside? Talk to other people around here?"
Zyza awkwardly went to nudge Kina, before thinking better of it and shrugging instead. "I thought talking to other people was the goal. Why so shy now?" Kina felt a small tingle of frustration at the question, but was quick to shut it down. As she wrote, she made sure to keep her hand steadier than normal.
"Because the last time someone other than you talked to me, I was accosted. And this book was stolen from me. If it hadn't been for you..."
She hesitated for a moment, biting the frayed bristles of her quill as she tried to think of what words would do her feelings justice.
"I thought the city was wonderful when I first got here. Big and scary, maybe, but amazing. So much to see, so much to do. And the first guard I talked to was actually really nice and helpful. But then I got up here and... I'm scared to go back outside, Zyza. Terrified. I've never felt so unsafe before in my life, and I never want to feel that way again."
Zyza took a longer, more thoughtful moment before speaking. Fear is a luxury I was not allowed back in my homeland. So I often forget how hard it can be for others. This city is flawed, yes, but still wondrous. I find what is true of all places is that the average hard-working person is always more pleasant than the wealthy that insist they are civilized. I built this room to face the lower city to remind myself of that. But look the other direction and we are 2 blocks from the castle. We are not like these people, Kina. We know what it's like to fight for what we have. Do not let them take that from you.
Kina nodded slowly, looking down. She wasn't sure what to write, what to say. Gingerly, she reached her fingers up to touch the bandage still tightly wrapped around her throat. She winced, hissing as the still sore flesh underneath protested the contact with a tingle and a burn. Finally, she opened her book and wrote again. I won't let them take away what I've been through. But they can, and have, taken my book. It's all I have as a voice. Without it, I am mute. How do I make sure they don't take that away from me?
I'd say brute force, farm girl, but I don't think you're mean enough.
Ziza smiled and shook her head.
So let's end tonight on a success. I'm capable of making a simple chain from adamantine.
Kina blinked. She wrote,
What's that?
A nearly unbreakable metal.
Ziza grinned.
Want to make something to secure that book?
For the first time since the incident, Kina smiled, and she meant it. Work on the chain began the following morning, when the 2 had a chance to fully shake off the jitters and tension from the incident. They got to work immediately with the dawning of the sun, sketching out a plan. As it was basically just a leash, it didn't take nearly as much effort to draft up a plan and get to work. It was uncomfortable for Kina, to put it mildly. In order to properly attach the chain to the book, she had to relinquish it into Ziza's hands, a prospect she was not at all eager to carry through with in the moment. She had filled an entire page with what essentially amounted to agitated pleading for Ziza not to damage it and make sure it got back into Kina's hands as quickly as possible. Her concerns, justified as they may have seemed, proved to be baseless, however. Explosions notwithstanding, there was a reason Ziza still had this job, and it was because she was good at it. It was shortly after lunch when the process was complete. A metallic ring, about an inch in diameter, had been riveted to the front cover of the tome, with the adamantine chain hooked securely onto it on one end, and onto a matching ring on the other. The sibling ring was fastened snugly to a pouch, attached to a simple bandolier, one that was slightly too big for Kina, the idea being that she would grow into it. She still had at least a few inches left to go. It was a simple build, but Kina was nibbling her nails the entire time. Finally, however, it was done. The dark metal had a green, lustrous sheen to it, as Ziza fastened it over the Kenku. Her hands were blistered and bandaged from the amount of effort it took to hammer the links into shape, but she was smiling proudly as she leaned back to admire their work.
I know it's a bit heavy. Comes with the territory on that metal. But how is it otherwise?
Ziza asked, sliding a spare pen into a compartment added to the book's spine. Kina practically snatched the book up to her the moment it was in reach, hugging it to her chest for a few seconds like a lifeline. As the tension in her shoulder subsided at being reunited with her voice, she started to test the length of the chain. There was sufficient length for her to comfortably hold it as she usually did, only having to make some mild adjustments to move the chain out of the way of her hand.
The pouch, which settled comfortably against her hip, was just the right size for the tome, and even had a flap to make it harder for someone to even try and steal it from her. After almost a minute of testing it at every angle, she flipped the book open and wrote,
It's actually really comfortable. Thanks, Ziza.
There was a bit of softness in the hobgoblin's face as she relaxed and smiled.
It was a genuine pleasure, my friend.
Her standard, awkward silence afterwards lacked the normal head nod to it, as she leaned against one of the workhorses inside. Ziza was not one to speak her emotions into existence, but after their time together, Kina was fairly certain the woman wore her heart on her sleeve. Something was making her uncomfortable. Curious, Kina blew a quick note on her ocarina while tugging on Ziza's sleeve. Her inquisitive glance and tilt of her head, she hoped, would be enough to communicate her question.
What's wrong?
Ziza ran her hands down her face and let out a long breath before answering.
I know what comes next. We need to talk about the power source for your voice.
Kina took a slight step back and wrote,
You said we'd have to head back out. That we have to get the power source from someone else in the city. And that you're not well liked. Crazy hopping goblin lady. Your words, not mine.
They were your words first.
Ziza's playful indignation faded quickly.
What we need is a soul shard, or a spirit crystal. Same thing, different levels of refinement. They're very powerful, highly regulated, and only obtainable in one place in this city.
Kina didn't say anything, waiting for Ziza to continue. But an uncomfortable feeling was building in her gut. Ziza was belating the point. With a groan, Ziza finally said what was making her hesitant about the situation.
The one who sells them is the same man who called the guards on you the day we met.
Were it not for the feathers covering her, it would have been all too easy to see the blood draining from Kina's face. Her shoulders tensed, and an involuntary squeak came from somewhere deep in her throat. Her grip on her tome, already tight and possessive, tightened to the point her knuckles whitened, and the leather cover groaned.
I'll take care of it. I can always call my sponsor and plead my case to them.
Ziza did not sound enthusiastic or confident.
I'll do what I can. You don't need to come. As a hobgoblin, though, I encourage you to. He has insulted you, and it should not go unanswered. I understand that is my culture, though, not yours.
Kina lowered her head for several seconds, forcing herself to breathe. A visible tremor crept into her hands, and she could feel how her heartbeat had increased. Finally, she opened her tome and wrote her response.
It wasn't just an insult. It was an attack. Maybe not his fist, but he made it happen. If you hadn't been there, I don't even want to imagine. But that man is a bully. And I was always taught that you stand up to bullies. Otherwise, you're just giving them permission to bully you again.
She hesitated a second, anxiously biting the feather of her pen before adding,
I'll come. All of this is so I can speak for myself. I need to have a say in this. I need to tell him why he sucks.
Ziza nodded her approval.
Excellent. I shall get my sword and crossbow.
Kina blinked, then quickly scribbled,
Wait, what? We're not going to hurt him, are we?
Only if we have to.
The hobgoblin grinned.
Oh, and by the gods, do I hope we have to.
Kina frowned and blew 3 shrill notes on her ocarina, which had long since been agreed to mean bad things happening. Then she smacked Ziza on the hip with her book.
Spoil sport,
Ziza grumbled, moving instead towards the bedroom to get a change of clothes. Kina dearly wished she had time to write a follow-up, but Ziza had already gone, leaving Kina to collect her thoughts and what bravery she could. She parked herself anxiously by the front door, looking out the window. A thin sheen of smoke stain obscured the world beyond the glass. Even so, she instantly recognized the shape of one of the guards walking past the building on his regular patrol. She felt a rush of discomfort pooling at the base of her spine, twisting her guts into a sailor's knot. She swallowed a lump in her throat and clutched her book even tighter.
Just stay close to Ziza. She won't let them touch me,
she thought to herself, repeating it like a mantra to try and calm herself. It didn't exactly work, and now she was remembering their armored hands on her shoulders and wrists.
Stop it!
She thought, smacking a hand against the side of her head.
Be brave, you stupid bird! You just wrote a whole darn speech about facing down a bully. You're a crow, not a chicken, so suck it up and be brave. Be brave. Be brave, please let me be brave.
Ziza returned, wearing a surprisingly nice suit that had a graceful feminine cut. It had clearly almost never been worn, but it was easy to guess it was something strictly for business meetings and other events where it was deemed necessary to look presentable. Ziza was not one that seemed to believe there was ever an occasion, so she looked odd, almost like a completely different person, as she ran a brush through her thick hair. Regardless of the disapproval from Kina at the thought of bringing weapons, Ziza had an ornate saber at her hip, and only when she put her arms down to adjust the shirt and vest was it clear that this was actually a formal military uniform. Are you all right? You look not good. What happened? Kina swallowed and wrote in a jittering scrawl, feeling a small tingle of embarrassment at her own request.
Remembering what happened last time I was outside. Nervous. I'm not a kid, but can you keep a hand on me? Please?
Ziza's nose wrinkled uncomfortably, and she swallowed. But she nodded, lifting a hesitating hand and eventually settling it on Kina's shoulder with uncertainty. Like this? Kina leaned into the touch, using it to ground herself. She felt a little silly, but feeling silly was better than feeling unsafe. She nodded up at Ziza with a small smile. Ziza smiled back, and with an assured look on her face, she gave the Kenku a gentle squeeze. With a firm arm, she guided Kina out the front door, standing next to her like a protective sentinel as they walked down the street. It was still only a few buildings down, but the curious looks that fell upon them made Kina feel the grip on her shoulder tighten reassuringly as the hobgoblin guided them to the shop. When they arrived at the storefront, Ziza opened the door, a little bell overhead jingling as they stepped in. Kina's eyes went wide in surprise as she gazed around the shop. There were so many things, far more than what she expected. There were abundant crystals, most of which she could only guess were diamonds. There were small bowls filled with pearls, and even a few things that glowed with their own light. That wasn't all, though. There were collections of grasshopper legs, what looked like vials of blood, powdered horns of various magical creatures, and even a jar labeled guano. Ziza ignored them all, weaving through the organized shelves and marching them to the front counter. The owner turned upon hearing them coming, but the practiced smile faded into a scowl as he saw the customers that were approaching. Miss Rashad. His lip curled. To what do I owe this visit? This young lady is in need of a spirit crystal. I would like to use my authorization to requisition it, Ziza said calmly. But Kina could feel the strain in the hobgoblin's fingers as she stopped herself from gripping her shoulder too tightly. The man's jaw set as he sneered at the two of them, not even attempting to mask his contempt. As if anyone would give you authorization to do anything with something that powerful. Zyza's jaw went equally clenched, and as her hand moved towards her hip, Kina had a momentary concern that she was reaching for the sword sheathed at her back. Instead, the hobgoblin produced a sheet of parchment and placed it onto the counter. My requisition form, signed and sealed by the Elvish twins. Kina blinked.
Elvish twins?
She thought. It occurred to her that she hadn't actually asked many questions about the why and how of Zyza's work, only ever the what. Maybe she would fix that when they were done here. Or better yet, when they got the crystal. She could think of worse topics for her first real conversation. I don't care about your forms, the shopkeeper spat back. As a private business owner, I have the right to refuse service to anyone. And I refuse to sell much more than a candle to a warmonger and her adopted grifter. Our money spends just as good as anyone else's. A dangerous growl was growing in Zyza's throat, but the words maintained their attempted civility. Besides, it really isn't for me, it's for her. Don't take out your grievances with me on her. If she wants something, she should speak for herself then. And what if I still refuse? Which will you do first to get your way? Kill me? He glared pointedly at Zyza, then shifted his gaze to Kina. Or rob me? If ever there was a straw to break the proverbial camel's back on Kina's restraint, that was it. Her hand slammed down on the table hard enough to knock something over. Her beak flew open, and before she could stop herself, words that did not belong to her spilled out. Hey! Are you supposed to be here? Get back to your part of the city! Guards! Guards! Get that bird! Before the aghast shopkeeper could even speak, his face in shock as if he had just been slapped, she continued, grabbing her book and bringing it down too. She jangled the chain loudly, angrily, while flipping to a clear page and furiously scribbling. All the while, the words she had heard from that brush with the guard spilled out. Finally, the last thing to slip out of her before she caught herself was in Zyza's voice. What are her charges? She turned the book to the shopkeeper, vision blurring and eyes burning, and tapped angrily on the paper.
I'm not a thief, you asshole! I just want to speak for myself, but I can't. That's the problem. And your stupid gem is the only option we have left to make it so I can. Do you see this chain? Look at it. I have to wear it now because you called the guards on me and they almost stole my book. The only thing I have to talk with. If anyone here is a thief, it's you.
You're still on about that, the man blustered, but with a slight waver in his voice. I was just doing my part as... What are her charges? Kina interrupted vocally, jabbing a thumb against her chest. What are her charges? What are her charges? What are her charges? Assaulted by the hobgoblin's cold, authoritative tone, the shopkeeper took a step back, stammering in surprise. Kenku don't live in this part of the city, and all of them are in the Thieves Guild. Kina was dangerously close to finding out if her claws could pierce human flesh at that remark, but she held herself back, closing her eyes. After a moment, she took her book and wrote in a steady hand.
Prove it.
A firm and reassuring hand was back on her shoulder. Looking up, she could see Zyza, her face glowing with pride as she smiled at her and nodded. The two then went back to glaring at the man in unison. The man's jaw opened and closed, as if he might inhale an answer and speak it, since he couldn't find one in his own head. When no such thing came to him, he closed his mouth with a sour look on his face before turning the parchment around to actually read it. Carrying it to the back of the shop, he pulled out a key to unlock a metal box. He produced a small shard of crystal that looked like a slightly opaque piece of uneven glass. Setting it down on the counter, he cleared his throat with a defeated but professional tone. "We do not have any refined pieces at this time."
"That's no trouble. This piece will do just fine."
Zyza nodded, giving Kina another secret squeeze. "That will be 300 gold pieces." He nodded, though he still looked like he was sucking on a lemon. Kina blinked.
300!
She thought. She knew that magical components could be steep, but if her internal math was correct, that was close to 15,000 loaves of bread worth of money. She looked up at Zyza, not wanting to complicate matters any further and trusting the hobgoblin to call out any real grifting if it were happening. Zyza placed a pouch on the counter, the amount already counted and ready. She had known the price, yet she hadn't said a word about it to Kina. The shopkeeper still took the time to count it, and once he was satisfied, he wrapped the little piece of crystal in a piece of cloth before putting it into Zyza's now empty pouch and handing it back. He did not thank them or wish them a good day, but Zyza was satisfied enough to nudge Kina to head back to her little workshop. Kina, however, resisted for a second to write one more thing down on her page.
My name is Kina. What's yours?
Unprepared for the polite gesture, the sour look on his face dropped. Mathis Calborn. Kina nodded and wrote him a final message.
I hope the next person to meet you can say it was a pleasure.
With that, she clacked her beak, tucked her book into her pouch, and followed Zyza out the door without looking back.